Hi, I'm Solonia. I'm one of the co-founders of the Change School, and if you're watching this or subscribe to our YouTube channel, then you may already know that the TCK Summit is something we launched earlier this year as a year-long virtual event with the aim of building a global community of TCK adults, parents, experts, researchers, academics, and anyone who has a view or opinion around the third culture phenomena, how it's evolved, and its implications for the future. And as we're in our final month of the 2015 summit, I'd love to take this opportunity to share a little bit about my own TCK background, as well as the themes and topics that we've covered this year, and also highlight some of the key insights and takeaways that I've had personally from the talks and contributions that we've had. And before I delve into that, I'd like to just take a moment to thank everybody who has contributed to this year's summit, as it's been really invaluable to have this platform of storytelling and sharing and creating a space for those connections to happen. So a little bit about myself. I'm obviously a TCK, being half Taiwanese, half Ethiopian, born in the US, raised in Taiwan and Singapore. I spent my college years and first 5 years of working in Boston and New York, and then I moved back to Singapore about 7 years ago. I think it would take at least 10 of these summit sessions for me to really share all the experiences I've had living in these various places and all the takeaways I've had from those experiences. But suffice to say that I the older I get, the more grateful I am for these unique experiences that I've had, and for the worldview and insights that it has helped me to cultivate over the years. I think it's a fortunate thing, not without difficulties, not without its ebbs and flows, but it is a very fortunate thing, I believe, to have had the experiences and early exposure to the world and enrichment on a cultural level for the majority of my life. So I am very grateful for that. I'd like to, I guess, share a little bit about one of the difficulties we sometimes have in making the. Oh my gosh. I'd like to share a little bit about one of the difficulties we sometimes have at the Change School in making the connection between this TCK Summit that we're running and the other work that we do under the Change School. Oftentimes, I think from an outside perspective, they seem disconnected and sort of parallel initiatives, whereas for us, it's obviously quite intertwined. And my hope is that over the coming months and years of running the summit, we'll be able to make that connection more clear. But as a starting point, I'd like to just reiterate our theory of change at the Change School, which is that we believe that only when an individual has clarity of themselves, who they are, where they come from, where they want to go, are they then able to navigate the world with confidence and clarity, resilience in the face of challenges, and in a constant state of flow, which for me really means finding that sweet spot between designing life in accordance with your personal values, and at the same time being able to let go. And so back to the theory of change, with that state of flow and resilience and self-awareness, only then do we believe individuals are able to act and feel and believe in global citizenship. And through that work and impact that they create, enable more individuals to be, feel, and act as global citizens. And one thing I want to clarify here is that for me personally, global citizenship is not so much about how many countries you've lived in and how many places you've seen in the world and how many languages you speak, although those are obviously part of it. To me, global citizenship is really more about a mindset that can be cultivated, and speaks to a set of values and beliefs and worldviews, which is really what we are trying to build at the Change School. So um, I guess the point I'd really like to highlight is that the bigger vision for the Change School is really to build more global citizens and to enable anyone to adopt a global citizen's mindset, regardless of their background, economic situation, circumstances, etc. Um, so I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit here, but I'd like to, as I mentioned, sort of recap some of the themes and topics that we've covered this year, because I think these are the very areas where we believe TCKs, global citizens, however you sort of self-identify, we believe these are sort of the areas where we have shared experiences and shared values in many ways, despite our very distinct and unique backgrounds and differences. So, some of the themes that we'd covered this year were around TCK values. What are those values, and are there similarities, and to what extent is that a function of our experiences? And I do think from everything that everyone has shared and through my own experiences, I definitely think that there are a set of values that most of us share. And just as an example, some of those may be openness and compassion and empathy, curiosity, and genuine interest in the world around us. As well as boldness and courage, I think. And it's bold in terms of the work that we do, in terms of being disruptive and thinking outside the box, existing outside the box, insofar as coming from different backgrounds, coming from different religions, and yet being able to feel a sense of connectedness to the world at large. The other thing we covered was identity, and I know that this is a really big one for a lot of TCKs everywhere in the world, and I think it is a personal journey that everyone, regardless of being a TCK or not, sort of goes through in trying to define and get comfortable with our own identities. And I think another element of it is where we feel we belong and where home is. And that's something I will kind of touch on again later on. Some of the other areas I think that speak to the global citizenship mindset, which we discussed, were the idea of love and families and relationships and how we handle those things as individuals who are highly mobile and tend to have grown up with an understanding that nothing really is forever and change is constant, and being able to reconcile our basic human needs for comfort and stability and certainty, while appreciating that part of what makes life so beautiful is the uncertainty, are the unexpected and the changes that happen around us all the time. We also talk about the knowledge economy and the values revolution, and those are two things that I really feel there's a lot more to unpack. But broadly speaking, what we're talking about here is the tendency for TCKs or citizens of the world to share knowledge and to go and search for knowledge and to find ways to use that knowledge and information and understanding to create impact or to pay it forward or to give back to the societies and communities that we value and appreciate. And that ties in really well with the values revolution, which we believe is happening now. And essentially that is about individuals, again, regardless of being TCKs or not, but as a whole, starting to prioritize our own personal values and trying to manifest those values in our actions, in our behavior, be it at home, be it at work, be it in our relationships. And that also ties in with another area we covered, which is mental health. And this is a bit of a taboo subject sometimes. It's not something that as a society we're often comfortable to talk about. But I think it's important to highlight the breadth of mental health, which for me also encompasses things like self care, things like self driven learning, constant growth. All of these things contribute to our psychological and mental health, and I do feel that TCKs as a whole may at times have an easier time recognizing the importance of those things for themselves because they have had to struggle and adapt in constantly changing environments. And it becomes more obvious, I guess, in those situations how important it is to stay sane and to stay comfortable in our own skin and to reach out for support when we need it. Um, and as I say, that's, it's not, sometimes TCKs struggle with it more than others. Sometimes it's easier for them, but I do think it's a very important piece to the overall global citizen's mindset. So if I were to take a sort of bird's eye view in line with this month's theme on everything that's been discussed within these smaller subtopics, I guess I really identify four main qualities or traits in the global citizen mindset, which we are trying to cultivate and build through our work at the Change School. So the first overarching trait I would say is connection. And by connection, I mean the ability to connect with individuals from different backgrounds, as well as having a sense of connection to the world at large. So, understanding that there's more than just ourselves, that there's more work to be done beyond the self work, which is very important. But there's work to be done everywhere we look on a community level, society level, global level. So, the question is, how do we use that sense of connection, or how do we build more connections in order to address the various areas that need attention or need problem solving? The second characteristic I would say is the idea of meaningful work and having a sense of purpose. I'm not one that believes that purpose is something we just find or land on. I think purpose is really a lifelong exploration. It's something we can only hope to be able to really define in our final days. I think part of the journey that is life is about understanding day by day through trials and tribulations and small wins and successes what that greater purpose is. And, if someone were to ask me what is the meaning of life, I would quite simply say to find our purpose and to create value in the world. The third thing I would mention, which I mentioned earlier, is self-care. I think, whether we as TCKs come to appreciate this earlier on in life or later on in life, I do feel that our shared experiences eventually lead us to a place where self-care becomes extremely important. And once again, by self-care, I mean cultivation of mind, body, and spirit. Um, and, um, and so I think it's important in recognizing that it's important to know that as a community of TCKs in general, and even non-TCKs, we do need support systems, and we can contribute to support systems in ensuring that self-care needs are being met on an individual level, again, or on a community level. And the last thing I would say, which ties in with all three of these characteristics, is paying it forward. The idea of paying it forward and giving back to whether it's our parents, whether it's our schools, our work environments, communities that we are part of, countries that we're living in. I think the idea of paying it forward is something that often gets embedded in our minds as TCKs quite early on, because again we have that early exposure and are able to see all the different intricacies of different cultures, and not only the positive qualities of all these cultures, but also some of the difficulties and challenges that people face within different societal groups or different cultural groups or different religious groups. And again, I think the call to action for us is really understanding where do we want to create and add value in the world using our unique set of experiences and traits and qualities and insights. I think that as a as a mindset, if one subscribes to the belief that global citizenship is more about a mindset rather than any type of person, then I think it also follows, at least for us, that it is not intended to be elitist or exclusive. Rather, it is something aspirational, and something that I would hope most of us, regardless of being TCKs or not, would want to develop within ourselves. And so I guess to wrap up in my final points, there's three things I'd like to say to TCKs everywhere. One is that this idea of home and belonging, I know it's a big one. I know it's a tough one. I think particularly in younger years, TCKs really struggle to try and define where is home, where do I belong. And I guess the only piece of advice I could give or would give is that home and belonging don't have to be static. To me, home is where you feel the most resonance, and that changes and evolves through different life stages, different circumstances, and different phases. And so, whereas there was a period in my life when the US was home, undoubtedly, in the same respect that Taiwan was home for a certain period in my life, and Singapore was home for a certain period of life. And today, ironically, while I've spent most of my years in Singapore cumulatively, my answer to where I belong varies, even sometimes according to my mood. And I think the most important thing is to be okay with it and to be comfortable with it and to not see it as a shortcoming, but to see it as something to be grateful for. Because not everybody can say they feel that level of resonance and connection with more than one place. And in the world that we live in today, I think it really is an advantage if you're one of the people who can say that and mean that and embrace it. The second takeaway I want to share is the idea of responsibility. So very early on, before we launched the TCK Summit, we were fortunate to connect with loads of TCKs around the world, different communities in the US, in Asia, and Europe. And one of the key points that was really interesting for me was that a lot of TCKs, particularly in the US, felt that the term TCK really helped them to identify who they were. But in contrast to the idea of being a global citizen, which they felt implied a set of responsibilities which they didn't necessarily subscribe to. And that was something really interesting for me to delve deeper into, because there is no right or wrong. There's no sense of obligation to have to give back. But I truly believe that in cultivating a global citizen's mindset, part of that, as I'd mentioned earlier, is an inherent desire, a genuine desire to pay it forward, to pay the positive influences and experiences we've had forward to those who may not have been fortunate, may not have been as fortunate to enjoy those things. And so I do, particularly as we build the TCK Summit next year, I do really want to look at how we can garner that sense of responsibility in a way that's positive and constructive and meaningful. And again, I think the key question is, what is the value that you want to create and add in this world and in this lifetime? And the last thing I want to say again is really just to reiterate that, global citizenship, global citizenry, whatever the terminology is, um, our intention is to make it something accessible and aspirational and inspirational, rather than something that is limited or open to a select few who come from very fortunate backgrounds. And I really can't highlight that and emphasize that enough. And in wrapping up, I guess I would just say, again, thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for listening to all the stories that everyone has shared. And we're really excited to continue the talks and the sharing and grow this community in 2016. We are doing a shout out for speakers, and you do not need to be a TCK to be a speaker on the summit. You just need to have a point of view. So if you are interested in sharing your story, if you have an idea or a topic you think is really important to bring to the conversation, please reach out to us, hello@thechangeschool.com. And that's it, folks. Thanks so much.